So rhythm A for lecture 5.1 is pretty challenging compared to the previous lecture, although it's compensated for a little bit by a slower tempo. We can see we've already got a lot of dynamics, okay, getting from piano gradually to mezzo piano twice, mezzo forte here, going from piano, mezzo piano a little louder, and then back to mezzo piano, piano to mezzo piano, piano to mezzo piano, mezzo forte, and then lower to piano at the end. So this is going to be pretty tricky in terms of dynamics, but this is good practice. All right, let's get into the elements. So here I've got 2 beats, because remember I always do 2 plus 1 for this meter. 2 beats. In the 2 beats I've got 8th rest 8th note, 8th rest 8th note, and then for the 3rd beat I have also 8th rest 8th note. Next measure, 2 beats, 8th notes, 2 8th notes plus 2 8th notes, and then for 1 beat I have 1 quarter note. Next measure, first 2 beats, 8th rest 8th note, 8th rest 8th note, and then the 3rd beat also 8th rest 8th note. Next measure, 2 beats is a half note, 1 beat is a quarter note. Next measure, 2 beats is 2 8th notes plus 1 quarter note. The 3rd beat is an 8th rest plus an 8th note. Next measure, 2 8th notes plus a quarter note, and then again 8th rest 8th note. Next measure, 2 8th notes plus 2 8th notes, and then 1 quarter note. Next measure, the beat structure flips to 1 plus 2. 1 quarter rest, and then 2 beats is a half note. Next line. First 2 beats I have quarter note plus 2 8th notes, and the 3rd beat I have 8th rest 8th note. Next measure, the beat structure flips. I have 1 beat is 2 8th notes, 2 beats is a half note. Next measure, back to regular. First 2 beats I have quarter note and 2 8th notes, and the 3rd beat I have 2 8th notes. Next measure, first 2 beats is 2 quarter rests. And notice that in 3/4 they don't use half rests, they use quarter rests. If there's 2 beats of rest, you'll use 2 quarter rests. And then the 3rd beat is a quarter note. Next measure. First 2 beats, we have 8th rest 8th note, 8th rest 8th note, and the 3rd beat is also 8th rest 8th note. Next measure. First 2 beats, we have 2 8th notes plus a quarter note. The 3rd beat is 2 8th notes. Next measure. First 2 beats, 8th rest 8th note, 8th rest 8th note, and the 3rd beat is also 8th rest 8th note. And this measure is all 1 dotted half note. Next measure, first 2 beats is 2 8th notes plus 2 8th notes. The 3rd beat is 1 quarter note. Next measure, first 2 beats, 2 8th notes plus a quarter note, and then 2 8th notes. Next measure, we have first 2 beats is 8th rest 8th note, 8th rest 8th note. 3rd beat is 8th rest 8th note also, and the last measure is another dotted half note. Here's 72. T, 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 ta. T, 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 ta, ta. T, T, ta. T, 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 ta. T, 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 ta. Ta, ta, T, 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 ta, ta, T, 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 ta, T, 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 ta, T, 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 ta, T, 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 ta, T, T, ta, T, 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 ta. Looking at rhythm B, the first measure is a dotted half note at mezzo forte. Next measure I have 2/8 notes plus 2/8 notes plus 1/4 note. Next measure. My first two beats are here this syncopation pattern. Remember syncopation from last week. And then I have 2/8 notes. Next measure also starts with the first two beats is a syncopation, and the third beat is a quarter note. Now we've gone to mezzo piano dynamic, and we are at a dotted half note for the whole measure here. Next measure, I have 2/8 notes plus a quarter, and then 2/8 notes. This measure, I have a syncopation plus 2/8 notes. This one, the beat structure is flipped. I have 1/4 note, and then a half note makes 2 more beats. This measure also flipped, and notice that they put an accent mark. So I have a quarter rest for my first beat, and the second part of the measure, the next 2 beats, I have a half note and then forte dynamic, and they put an accent mark there. So I have to emphasize that note when I perform it. Okay, this measure now, first 2 beats I have quarter rest, quarter note, and then 2/8 notes. Next line. Okay, I have a similar thing going on here. I have the beat structure is flipped. I have 1/4 rest to begin the measure, and then 2 more beats is a half note. This one is piano dynamic and accented at the same time. So I have to emphasize it, but at the same time keep it very soft. Next measure, I have the first 2 beats is a syncopation. Last beat is a quarter note. And this measure here, I have a dotted half. Next measure, the beat structure flips. You see I have 2/8 notes for my first beat, and those are mezzo forte. And then the next 2 beats are a syncopation. And then the same thing happens in the next measure. First 2 beats is 2/8 note. First 1 beat is 2/8 notes, and the next 2 beats are a syncopation. This measure here, I have the first 2 beats is 2/4 notes, and the third beat is 1/4 note. Next measure, first 2 beats is 2/4 notes plus 2/8 notes plus 2/8 notes, and the third beat is 1/4 note. Okay, now I'm at a forte dynamic, and I have a syncopation for my first 2 beats and a quarter note for my third beat. Here I have the same thing, but I have now mezzo piano dynamic with a crescendo. So I have my first 2 beats are a syncopation, and then the third beat is a quarter note. And then here I have an 8th rest 8th note, and then 2/8 notes for my first 2 beats. My third beat is a quarter note, and now my last measure is a dotted half note at forte dynamic. This one's also 72. Ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, 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 ta, 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 ti, ti, ta, ti, ta, ti, ta, ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, 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 ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, ti, ta, ti, ta, ti, ta, ti, 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 ta, ta. All right, that was a good one. I could imagine though, say on the second line, the part where the slur is, so the 1, 2, 3, 4th measure of that second line, could be a little tricky because you got syncopations on the second half of the measure. So let me try doing that on a loop. Ti, 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 ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, 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 ti, 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 ta. Okay, let me do it again. Ti, 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 ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, 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 ti, 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 ta. Okay, let me try putting it back in the whole thing now. Ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, ta, ta, ti ti ta, ti 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 ta, ti 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 ta, 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 ta ti ti, ta, ti ta, ti ta, ta, ti 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 ta, ti 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 ta, ti ta, ta, ta. Ti 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 ta, ti ta ti ta, ti ta ti ta, ti 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 ta ta.